In-depth coverage of the latest news, events, and stories from around the world. Our team of passionate journalists, reporters, and documentary filmmakers work tirelessly to provide you with accurate, unbiased, and thought-provoking content. Program.
Hello viewers and welcome to Wenyeji TV, courtesy of our producer and coordinator of this program. I am Mike James, bringing you the real story behind the Russian-Ukraine war, which has brought suffering in the world, causing global economic strain. The causes of the Russia-Ukraine war are complex and multifaceted, but some of the main factors are the historical relationship between the two countries, which dates back to centuries of Russian influence and domination over Ukraine, especially during the Soviet era. The geopolitical rivalry between Russia and the West, especially NATO, over the future of Ukraine and its alignment with either side. The personal ambitions and motivations of Russian President Vladimir Putin, who sees Ukraine as a vital part of his vision of a resurgent Russia and a buffer against NATO expansio. The conflict began in 2014, when Russia covertly invaded and annexed Crimea, a peninsula in southern Ukraine with a large ethnic Russian population and a strategic naval base. Russia also supported separatist rebels in the eastern regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, collectively known as the Donbass, who declared themselves as independent people's republics. A war erupted between the Ukrainian government and the Russian-backed forces, which has claimed over 14,000 lives and displaced millions of people. Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, breaking a ceasefire agreement and violating Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Russia claimed that it was acting to protect the rights and interests of ethnic Russians and Russian speakers in Ukraine, who it alleged were facing persecution and discrimination from the Ukrainian authorities. However, many observers saw Russia's aggression as an attempt to prevent Ukraine from joining NATO and to assert its dominance over the region. How has the war changed life in Ukraine? The current situation in Ukraine is very tense and volatile, as the country is facing a full-scale invasion by Russia, which began in February 2022. The war has claimed thousands of lives, displaced millions of people, and threatened the stability and security of the region and the whole world. According to the latest news reports, some of the main developments are overnight strikes in the Ukrainian cities of Lviv and Lutsk, hitting residential and industrial buildings, respectively. No casualties have been reported yet, but the damage is significant. Ukraine's counteroffensive appears to be intensifying along sections of the front line, but Kyiv warns that progress is likely to remain slow due to Russia's fortified defenses and minefields. Ukraine says it has had success on one of the front lines in the Donetsk region, taking the village of Staromayersky. Russia has continued its extensive missile attacks against Ukraine's port and grain infrastructure, destroying a historic cathedral in Odessa. Russia claimed its targets in the port city were being used to prepare terrorist acts and blamed the attack on Ukrainian air defenses. Ukrainian Navy reports that as of August 12, the Russian Federation does not hold a single missile carrier in the Black Sea. This is a positive sign for Ukraine, as it reduces the threat of naval attacks from Russia. The war between Russia and Ukraine is a complex and multifaceted conflict that has historical, geopolitical, and personal dimensions. What is the role of NATO in this conflict? NATO is a defensive alliance of 31 countries from Europe and North America, which was formed in 1949 to provide collective security against the Soviet Union. NATO's founding treaty states that an attack on one member country is an attack on all of them, and that they will assist each other with whatever means necessary to defend themselves. NATO's role in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is to support Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and right to self-defense, as well as to deter further Russian aggression. Ukraine is not a NATO member, but it is a close partner of the alliance, and was promised eventual membership at a NATO summit in 2008. However, Russia opposes Ukraine's integration with NATO, and has demanded that the alliance guarantees that Ukraine will never join it. NATO does not have any troops in Ukraine, but it is working with the country to modernize its armed forces, provide humanitarian and non-lethal aid, and coordinate its requests for assistance from allies. NATO has also increased its presence and readiness in the region, conducting more exercises, patrols, and deployments to reassure its eastern allies and demonstrate its commitment to collective defense. NATO has also imposed sanctions on Russia, suspended practical cooperation with Moscow, and engaged in diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the crisis. NATO's involvement in the conflict is based on the principle of solidarity among its members and partners, as well as the respect for international law and human rights. NATO has repeatedly called on Russia to end its military intervention in Ukraine, withdraw its troops from the border, respect the ceasefire agreements, and engage in constructive dialogue with Kyiv and the international community. How has the Russian-Ukraine war affected the world? The Russia-Ukraine war has affected the world in various ways, both economically, politically, socially and religiously. Here is a brief summary of some of the main impacts. Economically, the war has caused a major shock to the global economy, especially in the commodity markets. The prices of oil, gas, wheat and other products have soared due to the disruption of supply from Russia and Ukraine, which are major exporters of these goods. The war has also triggered a wave of sanctions from the US, the EU and other countries against Russia, which have isolated it from the international financial system and caused its currency to collapse. The IMF estimates that the war could reduce global GDP growth by over 1 percentage point in the first year and push up global inflation by about 2.5 percentage points. The war has also exposed the vulnerability of Europe's energy security and the need to diversify its sources and increase its efficiency. Politically, the war has challenged the core principle of international peace and security, which is the prohibition of the use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. The war has also created a deep rift between Russia and the West, reminiscent of the Cold War era, and undermined the role of multilateral institutions such as the UN, NATO and the OSCE. The war has also increased the geopolitical tensions in other regions, such as Central Asia, where Russia's influence and interests are at stake. The war has also raised questions about the future of European integration and transatlantic cooperation, as well as the role of China and other emerging powers in the global order. Socially, the war has caused a huge humanitarian crisis, affecting millions of people in Ukraine and beyond. According to the UN, more than 11 million people have left their homes in Ukraine so far, either as refugees or internally displaced persons. Many of them face dire conditions, such as lack of food, water, shelter, health care and education. The war has also resulted in thousands of deaths and injuries, as well as widespread human rights violations and atrocities. The war has also disrupted the social fabric and cohesion of both countries, as well as their cultural and historical ties. Religiously, the war has highlighted the role of religion in both countries' national identities and histories. Both Russia and Ukraine trace their origins to the medieval kingdom of Kievan Rus, which adopted Orthodox Christianity in the 10th century. However, since then, they have developed different religious traditions and affiliations. Ukraine's Orthodox population is divided between two churches, one loyal to Moscow and one independent from it. Ukraine also has a significant Catholic minority that follows a Byzantine rite similar to that of the Orthodox. Russia's invasion of Ukraine was partly justified by Putin as a defense of the Moscow-oriented Orthodox Church, which he sees as an integral part of Russia's history, culture and spiritual space. However, leaders of both Ukrainian Orthodox churches have denounced the Russian invasion and called for unity among Ukrainians. The division between Ukraine's Orthodox churches has also reverberated worldwide, as other Orthodox churches have struggled with the confusing challenge on how to respond to the crisis. What are some of the measures which can be applied to end this war? There are different possible solutions to end the crisis in Ukraine, depending on the perspectives and interests of the parties involved. Some of the solutions that have been proposed or discussed are: a military solution. This would involve Ukraine regaining control of its occupied territories by force, with the support of the US and its allies. This would be a clear victory for Ukraine and a defeat for Russia, but it would also entail a high risk of escalation and confrontation with a nuclear-armed power. It would also require a sustained and costly commitment from the West to provide Ukraine with the necessary military and economic assistance. A diplomatic solution. This would involve a negotiated settlement based on the existing Minsk agreements, which outline a roadmap for ending the conflict and restoring Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. This would require concessions from both sides, such as granting some degree of autonomy to the rebel-held areas, withdrawing foreign troops and weapons, holding local elections, and restoring border control. It would also require the involvement and mediation of other actors, such as France, Germany, the US, and the OSCE. A compromise solution, this would involve a partial or temporary resolution of some of the issues, while leaving others for later or indefinitely. For example, one proposal is to agree on a ceasefire and demilitarization of Ukraine, while postponing the question of Crimea and Donbass. Another proposal is to allow Ukraine to pursue closer ties with the EU, while respecting Russia's security interests and avoiding NATO membership. These solutions could reduce the immediate tensions and violence, but they could also create new problems or uncertainties in the long term. There is no easy or ideal solution to this complex and protracted crisis. Each option has its advantages and disadvantages, and each faces significant challenges and obstacles. Ultimately, the outcome will depend on the political will and willingness to compromise of the main actors, as well as the pressure and support from the international community. To all our viewers, we hope you have enjoyed this brief analysis of the Russian-Ukraine conflict. This is Wenyeji TV. I am Mike James, and on behalf of our executive producer James Wataka, we wish you the best.
Here at Wenyeji TV, we are dedicated to bringing you in-depth coverage of the latest news, events, and stories from around the world. Our team of passionate journalists, reporters, and documentary filmmakers work tirelessly to provide you with accurate, unbiased, and thought-provoking content. Program.